If you saw Atlas, the giant who holds the world on his shoulders, if you saw that he stood, blood running down his chest, knees buckling, his arms trembling, but still trying to hold the world aloft with the last of his strength, and the greater his effort, the heavier the world bore down upon his shoulders, what would you tell him? To shrug. G'day everybody, and welcome back to the channel. It's been a while, and I'm a little bit out of practice, so hopefully this video goes well. A lot has happened recently. When I was young, we always had the shed, the workshop that I'm in currently. We were very lucky. It was a creative outlet for us, and it was a space that we could learn to problem solve. Of course, we weren't allowed to be down here without Dad. It's still a workshop. We were very privileged because we had this creative space, and something that I didn't realize until well through school, very few kids actually had a creative space like this. Let alone a shed. They didn't have a creative space like a sewing room or a crafts room, and a lot of them had to go to school to utilize the school's creative spaces because they just didn't have spaces like that at home. And I was much older when I watched this play out in real time. I was in metalwork and we were making dolly punches. Dolly punch. But one kid, he had turned it down too far and he couldn't cut the threads in the end because it was too small. And he was pretty upset about this because he thought that this meant that he was going to have to start again. So I looked at his work and I thought, well, you haven't made the other two components. Theoretically, you could turn this down a little bit smaller, drill out your two other parts slightly smaller, and rather than using something like an M10 thread, use something like an M8. It'd just be slightly different to what the drawing had. And he was taken aback. He was like, wait, you're saying that I don't have to throw this out, I can keep going? I was like, yeah, probably. I reckon this will work out. It did. All worked out in the end. This is what I meant when I said that the shed gave us a means to learn how to problem solve, because I dealt with not that problem exactly, but a similar problem previously. Problem solving isn't something that can really be taught as such, not in the traditional sense. You learn how to problem solve by being exposed to problems. More importantly, being exposed to skills, learning skills that could be potential solutions, because that's what skills are. They are solutions in search of problems. Like Adam Savage says, it's another tool in the tool belt. But that was my situation with the workshop, with the shed. What about other people? What was the problems that other people were experiencing in their lives, and how were they taught to deal with them? With people's first experiences with problem solving is gaming, and of course no shade to gaming. I've personally learnt quite a bit through gaming. Games like Portal taught me how to think outside the box. Sandboxes like Minecraft and Terraria taught me how to innovate on design. Games like Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy taught me how to deal with frustration in the unrelenting face of failure, to see through the fog of anger and hopefully come out the other side with something better. When it comes to most people's experience with that, games have a tendency to give you a one of two option problem outcome. You have your problem, and over here you are skillful enough that you succeed. Or you have your problem, you fail to solve that problem, and you restart. That's it. Game over, get good. And I think this is a valuable life skill, to be able to persist in the face of failure. But the problem is that it's kind of wasteful, right? And I don't just mean in the sense of that kid was going to throw away his punch because, well, that's it. But rather, we only got 4 hours in that class every week, meaning that he spent 40 minutes turning this down or whatever it was, and now he has to throw it away? That mentality pays no respect to the effort that went into his first attempt. I don't think this is bad to game design, of course not. And there are certainly examples of the alternative. But what I'm saying is, when it comes to people's response to failure, throw it away and I'll start again. And because that is such a negative and wasteful way of pursuing something, especially a new skill and a new hobby, a lot of people see the other option that's just on the other side of that, and that is, I give up. But what about when kids reach high school? Well, I think back to things like maths, English, science, history, whatever. You're sort of taught to deal with problem solving the exact same way. You have those two options. You either get the answer right or you get it wrong. You scribble out your wrong answer and you put the right answer next to it. Yes, there's always going to be the alternative to that is like creative writing experiences, innovating on the first draft. There's a lot of caveats here. It's not the point. The point is that you only really start dealing with your mistakes, facing your mistakes, and trying to adapt your mistakes when you start dealing with physical classes like engineering, metalwork, woodwork, art even, design and technology, or shop as the Americans call it. These classes sort of cultivate that failure process and the innovation process. They force you to face your failures and come up with solutions. Okay, you had a problem, you failed, now what are you going to do? Are you going to innovate on that failure, and are you going to adapt your design? Are you going to ignore the failure because it doesn't compromise what you're trying to achieve? Or restart. Not everybody succeeds, but everybody fails, and it's through our repeated exposure to failure that we learn to innovate, that we adapt. And it was in this metalwork class that I realized that my past experiences with failure wasn't this massive wreck of a ship that was dragging me down, but it was actually debris that I could float upon. Falling short of my own goals and expectations was the thing that helped me push past my peers. But this wasn't exactly what I wanted out of it, because I actually enjoyed the experience of helping out this other guy in my class. I wanted to do it more. And this, of course, posed an opportunity. I enjoyed making stuff, whether that be at home or whether or not that be at school. So why not film what I was doing and upload it to YouTube? Hopefully encourage other people to be creative. I could show people the problems that I was experiencing in my own projects, the problems that I was facing, the solutions that I was coming up with, and hopefully help people share ideas and maybe share solutions. And thus the idea of Crafted by Tim was first formed. And that was 9 years ago. For me, YouTube seemed like the perfect platform for this sort of thing. It was widely accessible, it was mostly free. This felt like an opportunity, and if I was in charge of government, I would be saying, wait, what do you mean we could have an online tutoring platform that's free, widely accessible for anyone who has a library card or internet access, but it actually pays its creators in ad revenue? This platform could very well be the rising tide that lifts all the ships. Imagine the world that we could have if we could all share ideas instantaneously, being able to share knowledge, being able to share our problems with each other, share our skills and solutions, that we could borrow and trade ideas. This is all very fantastical, but this was genuinely what I thought YouTube would end up being. And of course, this doesn't come without its problems, its downfalls. But we do the best that we can with the tools that are at the disposal of YouTube. For me, I think this channel has been a really good thing. Not financially, God no. But in terms of getting ideas and being productive, inspiring people to get out there and being inspired by others. I had a drive to make things more than ever, and it felt like I had a purpose. In July, I went to the US. I know, what a time to go. What a time to go. Ooh. But I went to San Francisco and I went to Open Source. Gotta rep the merch. Open Source was a creator convention run by William Osman. And it was awesome. It was so good to see so many inspiring people, so many inspired people. Sharing ideas, talking about what they were doing, talking about things like right to repair, creating anything when it comes to technology and creativity. It was an awesome feeling to be amongst all of those sorts of people. I got to meet some of the people that I've looked up to for a really long time. People like Evan and Caitlin, people like Michael Reeves, Kevin the Backyard Scientist, Ian Davis. It was awesome. And I would have never attempted to do that sort of thing, to fly to the other side of the world, especially now, if it wasn't for this channel. I think I've been putting this off because I think that if I don't say it, it's not going to happen. But it is going to happen. Pretty soon I'm going to be kicked off YouTube. I haven't broken terms of service. I haven't broken the law. At least not yet. But it's coming. So, coming back from the US, my feed was pretty rapidly being filled up with the news of digital identification and age verification coming to Australia. The idea was that governments want to remove kids from social media platforms. To be honest, it's a very ambitious goal. And if you look at it from just solely a surface level perspective, maybe even a noble goal. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to play out. At this point in time, YouTube may very well be banned in Australia if it doesn't comply with the new set forward laws. But the minimum requirement, if it isn't banned, is that you will need to provide age verification to use this platform. Something like a government-issued identification. Something like a driver's license or a passport. And I have absolutely no intentions of handing over documents like that to YouTube or YouTube's third party for safekeeping. Now look, there is a lot that can be said about the way that this is being rolled out. Without even being conspiratorial about this whole situation, it's a concerning responsibility to be handing this over to platforms and saying, look after all of your users' identification and basically just ensure that they don't fall into the wrong hands. If they do, if the company gets hacked, if there's a leak or something like that, what happens to my identification? Will I even know that it's on the dark web for sale? I've dealt with the Australian Passport Office, and I'm sorry, but it was shocking to hear the information. If you think that your passport has been compromised, the best we can do is cancel it and issue you a new one, which will cost you $400. That's how much passports cost here in Australia. I think it's like $412, $413. I don't know what we're paying for if that is the level of service that we get for that sort of thing. Anyway. But I can't help but also look at the more conspiratorial sort of side to this. For instance, media giants being paid off by questionable sources, where are you going to turn to? Well, you're going to turn to independent journalists. They don't operate on daytime TV, that's for sure. They operate on things like YouTube or Instagram. Governments want to take the next generation of voters off that site. Or should I talk about the fact that this gives a massive amount of power to the government, linking people's identification directly to their accounts, making it very easy to track who says what. And of course, we may not be talking about this current government, but what about the next one? Or the one in 3 decades into the future? Look, I understand the want and the need to protect kids, but there are better ways to go about doing that than putting a very, very dangerous requirement across the board that affects the entirety of the population and could very well only protect a very small amount of people. Maybe not even that. And in the meantime, are they pushing people to worse ends of the internet to try and find the things that they're looking for? Because the worse ends of the internet are not governed by the laws, but they instead have a lot worse actors behind them. There are already parental controls that are built into most of these platforms and to people's actual browsers. And these are the things that the government should be, if they want to help, they should be pointing at these saying, look, this is how to set up a child lock on your router. This is how to enact parental controls on your kid's phone or social media. This is how to have meaningful conversations with your kids. And look, I'm not saying that parents don't know how to parent. I'm saying that the governments shouldn't be the ones that are doing the parenting. It's sort of very telling, though, what sort of platforms they're going after. Okay, so they want to ban kids from social media. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Okay, if these platforms didn't have parental controls and banning kids was the only option to keep them safe, sure, I guess that makes sense. And YouTube. Hang on, isn't YouTube more of an educational resource? Are teachers going to have to send home a letter saying, we're going to be watching an ASAP science video in class. We need parental consent because we're going to be showing them an 18+ website. Oh, and Spotify. Why? And Wikipedia. Why? Kids, they banned online education. I guess you're going to have to come over here and sit and watch the news with me and watch the worst of humanity play out in real time. And don't be skipping them sports bet ads. They are my favorite part. And I want you to grow up just like me and be a hardcore gambling addict. I know I should be fighting this. To stand up in what I believe in, and I shouldn't. Maybe that's what this video is that it's my attempt at spreading awareness and let people know what's happening. And the reality is that I don't see a way forward. And I want to say that I know that this too shall pass, but I don't see the reason that I should feed the machine that is so desperate to take my creativity, to chew me up and shit out some AI abomination, the perfect amalgamation of what it thinks creativity is, without any of the trials and tribulations that led me to this point, the 9 years of cultivating skills, without any of the failures that I've had that push me to do what I'm doing here. Because I hate it. I hate sucking at things, but I know it's part of the process, and I know that me sucking at things help other people suck a little less at the same thing, because they can learn from my experience. And I don't know what I'm going to do from here. What restrictions I'm going to face going forward. I have absolutely no intention of deleting my channel. It will remain up as long as the powers that be let it. Until the powers out of my control take it away from you. Because I don't want to delete the last 9 years of my life. I don't want to restart. But sometimes innovation means a change of course. And perhaps a new platform will spring up. Maybe it will be the utopia of information that I've been hoping for. But in the digital age, in the shrinking world that we inhabit, even though we are more connected than ever, we're more creative than ever, and we talk more than ever, we seem to have less say than ever. So do I bend the knee, or do I take a bow? Anyway. Thank you so much for the last 9 years. It's been awesome. Stay safe and happy crafting.
When the machine has taken the soul from the man, it's time to leave something behind. I was just trying to leave something behind.